You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Michael, welcome in. Are you outdoors at this point? Is that what I'm seeing?
No, I'm in my office at work. So.
It just looks like a great virtual background. I thought you were climbing some mountain or something back there.
I wish, yeah.
That's good. Well, your office at Stanford or your office where?
Yeah, at Stanford, I had to come in for something, so yeah.
There's like no one there, right?
Well, we're actually seeing patients again, so.
So it's back in action? You're back in action?
Pretty much full go again.
And you're doing lifestyle medicine still, right?
Yeah, I mean, really trying to build up this center. So I was working all week on a grant. Hopefully that'll kind of get us off the ground. But yeah, building a team and some exciting stuff. I'd love to sit down with you and tell you what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing all the things I do every day of the week with like 20 or 30 different startups. And it's always the same thing. Try to get the team together, try to get them organized, try to get them to see the big picture and the vision, and then making sure that the allocation of tasks and responsibilities all work out and people start delivering. But it's the same process over and over again, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit or anything else.
Yeah, it sounds really similar.
It's very similar. And there are people that are turning it into almost a science in the sense that project management has become more adept at figuring out what really creates the bottlenecks. You know, usually it's like money and funding sources, but it's also people. And it's also whether people team well together or don't team well together.
Yeah, I think we're building a good team. I think it's just going to be more, and we got a home now within the Longevity Institute. So I feel like it's just trying to get some funding to really do some things.
Right. So I've been spending a lot of time, and you probably haven't had a chance to listen to any of the back and forth that I've had with Dr. Leonard Hayflick. You may remember he gave a presentation to the group a couple of years ago about kind of the Hayflick limit and his views about the second law of physics playing its major role and entropy playing a major role. And we've been talking about aging around the differences between biological age and chronological age, and whether you can get to a point of measurement short of simply talking about passage of time in years and months and days and ultimately hours and minutes and seconds right up to the very end. And you're really in the area of what I'll call delaying death. If you had to use two words for what you do, and maybe you'd say that's all of what medicine does, is delay death. But do you think there is sort of a notion of, there used to be a website years ago called Real Age that tries to measure your biological age in some way? I think it's still around. In fact, I know it's still around. I'll tell you why in a minute. But there are differences between chronological age and what might be called your biological age, or between lifespan in years and say health span also in years, but they don't typically match each other, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I would just say I would say what I do is a little bit different than how you describe it. I would say it's more, instead of preventing death, it's optimizing longevity.
Or optimizing health span to be equal to lifespan, right? You want both things to go together. Ideally, you don't want to sit around sort of like that curve when it starts to go down. It might as well go down all at once if you could stay, and then the lights go off at once. That would be an optimized life, right?
Yeah. How long can you keep it going at that same level or higher?
Right. I mean, do you think of it as, if you're a baby, you're kind of at the height, like a baby is in perfect health, a newborn. By the way, my eldest daughter just had her first child, a girl. I have 3 other grandchildren, so this is the 4th, but it's the first for her. My other daughter has 3. And I think of those pictures of that baby as, wow, that baby's in perfect health, right? Or do you think of it, nah, that isn't even, we can't even measure that. Don't even talk about that. That's like a partially created human being. That's the brain's got to develop. There's all sorts of stuff that's got to happen. Or how do you think of it? I'm kind of curious. How do you think of a newborn in this structure?
Well, I feel they're still forming. Having 3 kids under all 15 and under, one who's 5, 11, and 15. I feel like they're still forming.
Yes.
So I would say that, and working with so many college kids, I would say it's probably not until your mid-20s that you're sort of developed, right? And you're psychologically.
So you would
physically.
think of it as your life kind of is heading to a certain optimal point. Let's call it age 25, maybe 24, maybe for some 21. And then you should go steady state for a while. And then there's going to be some decline, hopefully not a lot. You're not going to keep going up to the age of 50. I suppose there are maybe some athletes that do, but I tend to think you hit your optimum perhaps in your mid-20s, or maybe you'd say if you're lucky a little later in time.
Well, I think even later. I mean, if you look at like women distance runners, they don't hit their peak typically till they're in their 30s. Some of them, their mid-30s even. So, it probably a little bit later than that even.
So do you think there are studies that are trying to understand that optimal curve where you'd say, where do you get, because obviously baseball players probably say their optimum is different than basketball, and football is probably the worst of all, because football, I think those guys just get crushed in football. I mean, if they don't get crushed in their head, they get crushed in the rest of their bodies, right? To some degree.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, that's got to be, other than boxing, that's got to be the toughest sport that's out there. I mean, they're whacking each other all day long there, right? Even a quarterback is.
Well, I mean, I think that the positive side of it is just that they're incredibly fit. And we know that fitness correlates with, a healthy biologic age. So in that sense, it's the trauma. So if they can avoid the trauma to any degree and get out of it relatively unscathed, I think it was a plus, but it's the trauma that really sets them back.
So when you look at all the studying you've done of lifestyle, do you say to yourself, yes, you can definitely have a younger biological age or an older biological age than your chronological age? And it does actually take a degree of self-regulation or self-determination or really self-care that the medical community just can't deliver the way you yourself can deliver it to yourself if you really care for yourself. Is that too much of a summary statement of what lifestyle is all about, or what would you say?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that, traditional Western medicine really does focus what you were alluding to earlier, which is really treating disease. And what we're talking about here is sort of preserving health. And so, typically you go to the doctor when you're sick, not to tell you how to stay healthy.
Right.
And that's where lifestyle medicine, I think, steps in, is how can you use really simple things that we would consider simple. Talk about the 5 pillars, right? So sleep, nutrition, fitness, social connection, mental health. And how do you maximize that throughout your lifespan? And I think it's all important. I mean, I think your attitude is probably as important as anything that you do physically.
Do you think there's just 5, or do you think there's more like 7? You might notice I've got this chart up because I've been working on this book. You've heard a version of the presentation about the 7 essences, and health is foundational. And obviously you're saying they're like pillars that you say are 5. I have this pyramid that has 7, but the 7 are really about more than just health. Health is at the bottom, and sane and sober is the way I think of health. And you'd say that's way too summary. And you've heard my presentation about how an optimized life kind of has all of these levels to it and then some. But I often think of health as more than just the 5 you mentioned, more than nutrition, sleep, exercise, attitude, and I think you have a 5th one that I forget now.
Well, I'm sort of sticking to the script of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, but I would agree with you, because I think in you can take the categories of stress management or social relationships, and I think you could easily branch out into at least a couple other categories from that, because there's a lot that falls into those.
Right, because a lot of people look at things, and I just did this survey on realage.com where they were asking about how often do you drink, how much sleep are you getting, and what's your cholesterol? And you have to have some data that you punch into this system. And it gave my age as 10 years younger than my actual chronological age. I'd be really interested if you tried this. You might get bored doing it because I think you're way younger than your chronological age. But you would be interested in the way they did this survey because they're blending it into some sort of set of statistics designed to say something about, well, are you kind of aging more rapidly? Because I'm not really 55 in a sense, but they're indirectly saying you're probably 10 or 20% better than most people that are 65 years old, is my guess of what they're really saying when they say you're 10 years younger. You're some percentage degree sort of more active or better. And they do ask for your weight, and I probably could stand to lose 50 pounds. And if I lost 50 pounds, I probably would be way younger and way more healthy, right? So they put on the list, when they come back, they give you a list like this. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm not here, they're not a sponsor, and I don't have any sponsors. I do this stuff, pro bono, and the point of it is to just enable people to see, how this aging stuff works. But they come back with a number that looks like this, and you could tell me, of course, now it's not up, but let me put it up. It looks like this on the screen. It shows my calendar age, which is 65 and 7 months, but it's saying I'm 10 years and 2 months younger, but it also recommends to improve your real age, that I'm saying is biological age, eat better, manage stress, move more, sleep better, join a challenge, track your health, take an aspirin. They even believe in aspirin, which I thought was controversial. Shed all the extra weight, get better, get your cholesterol numbers to be different, and so on. But I'm kind of curious, do you see this as a tool that will eventually become more common? Because a lot of people I talk to don't even know this site exists. And when they know it exists, they say, well, how do you know it's accurate? This is all guesswork at best, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this will become a lot more popular, but I think it's going to go way past this, where they're, going to look at your telomere length and your DNA methylation and all, things of that nature, to really, really look at it at a true biologic level, how you're aging.
So you would say, well, that's really a simplistic kind of general survey, and it's not at the level of really looking at the physiological markers, including even length of telomeres, which to me, that gets right to the whole Hayflick limit in terms of what's happening to cellular activity, right?
Absolutely.
And you'd say, yeah, that's measurable. I don't know how you would get that measured. It's not like you go to some, drugstore to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
even clinic, right?
I think there's some companies working on it. I don't think there's anything out there yet that I'm aware of that can, precisely tell you how you compare, but I'm sure it's in the near future.
Have you ever tried to measure your telomeres? I'm kind of curious.
I haven't, no.
Is that something you would even want to do?
I'm kind of torn about it, because it's kind of like what I remember my track coach, he would say about, kind of hearing your time. So, if you hear your time in the middle of the race, it's going to tell you a couple of things. Either it's going to tell you you're way behind, or you're way ahead of the game, and then you're going to slow down. So I'm not sure if I want to know. But I am curious enough to see what's out there.
Well, I just did a search on Google, and the search was, how do you measure? I'm going to show you. This is the actual search I did, and you're going to see, you're going to crack up, because there actually is a company. I did the search around how to measure telomere length, and sure enough, what came up, and we're doing this all in real time, a couple of ads, something called TeloTag, telomere length assay by a company called Sigma Aldrich. And I guess it's a Roche product, so that's a reputable company. There's another one that's called How to Measure Telomere Length. That was the one that I opened by Qfish. And then I opened the site and it came up with kind of some details. And there actually was a product on the market. So I guess this is becoming something that is productized to some degree, which I didn't even know it existed. Like, it sounds like you are seeing this for the first time as well, or is this something you haven't seen before?
I haven't seen this exactly. I've heard people talk about that there are some companies out there, but I haven't explored it enough. It seems to me like they're still in an early stage of this, because until you really look at a huge distribution of the population, I don't think you can really say what's normal and what's appropriate for a certain age or not. But maybe they have enough data, but I'd be surprised if they're fully there yet.
Right, but your point is that we are going to get to the point where this data becomes much more readily accessible, usable, and actionable in a self-determination kind of way, where people will be like, absolutely, I've gone in for my quarterly or annual telomere assay. I've gone in for my annual, and the annual becomes not just a patient record, but maybe something in your smartphone that you then start to look at how is that data improving or not improving one way or the other.
I think eventually that is the direction we're heading in.
Do you see it as sort of a role of an Apple or a Samsung to actually be the platform, or do you see it as, hey, there's got to be some trusted, absolute third-party deal that almost becomes like a real medical device that you kind of strap on, and it's independent of your smartphone and independent of your texting and messaging and firewalled away from the internet in some smart way that enables you to be sure that your health data is not compromised? Because right now it seems as though Apple is trying to collect a lot of data, as is Samsung and Google and others, right?
I think where I'm a little hesitant is just that, what do you do with the information? Let's say you're doing everything that you think is right. Can you modify that? Could it potentially have a negative impact on you?
Because you don't want data that's adverse to necessarily get into the wrong hands. It's definitely going to affect opportunity, because I think people are biased even against short people and fat people, and that's called body shaming. But some really smart people were short and some really smart people were fat. I mean, Einstein didn't look like he was the picture of health, did he, at the time that he started the Manhattan Project, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy that probably had actually a lot of medical problems that we don't really hear about. Apparently, he's had all sorts of other psychological and emotional problems, according to one or more of his ex-wives, right?
Right.
But when you think about your work at Stanford, are you tying any of this stuff into the work of the center, of what you're creating there, or is it just a footnote to the story?
Well, I would say the discussion we're having right now is sort of way ahead of where we're at this point. At this point, if you just look at society, we're so burdened by just chronic disease. And if people can just adopt some simple lifestyle changes, they can make a huge difference in terms of their propensity for chronic disease and improve their longevity. So in a sense, I don't want to sort of jump to this area quite yet, just because there's so many simpler things that we can do as a starting point. And even we've just been working on a grant to how do you introduce lifestyle medicine into the underserved community?
I think you have to gamify it. I'll be honest with you. I do see a role of the smartphone. If it's not going to be the data collector or the data manager, I do think that if we were to gamify health literacy in a way that got people doing it the way they do Pokemon, or they used to do Pokemon out there on the street, where you get points and you get some positive feedback, whatever that is. Dr. Walter Bortz, a good friend and colleague of both of ours, and my next door neighbor, recently 90 years old, writes the books about daring to be and beyond 100, he likes to say we should give people tax credits. We should say if you're living a healthy lifestyle, your taxes are lower. Now, I don't know that Donald Trump would like that because I don't think he necessarily has the healthiest lifestyle in the world, not based on what I see him eat and not based on what I've seen him recently declare he's been taking. But think of it for a second. Imagine we had some self-perpetuation of tax returns that said you earned a $20,000 tax credit because of the way in which you manage your lifestyle. Because let's face it, the healthcare system is breaking at the seams with unhealthy people. And it's going towards 1/3 of our GDP at this point. It's not a small problem, right?
Well, certainly, I think the key there is tie it into healthcare costs and to motivate people by staying healthy, doing the right things, that they reduce their healthcare costs. I mean, that's an immediate benefit. That's very tangible.
It's very tangible, and it might be if you appify it in a way that shows that the earnings are growing. Like if you were to say, if you don't like the tax credit idea, maybe you automate a payment into a 529 plan or into some sort of HSA account or some other account that allows people to get massages or get their pedicure done, or something that you might say is a joyful experience. Like some women say they miss getting their nails done. This COVID thing has caused them not to get their nails done, and they miss that more than, say, restaurant food. That's an interesting statement because a lot of people might say, well, I miss going to a restaurant. But the truth is the number one survey is hair salons and manicures and pedicures. Not for men, but for women. Men are like probably, hey, I miss going to a bar, which, as we know, is probably great from a social point of view and probably not so great from a health point of view, depending on how much someone drinks. But you're saying we're at the level of just basic, simple 52 cards in the deck. How about we just start reading the cards that can be turned over rapidly with no automation? Just open the deck of cards and start reading some of the cards. There's information on those cards, right?
Right. Like it's not that complicated, Stanford actually has started a nice program for the faculty, which is called Be Well. And they do give incentives for going to an exercise class and, keeping your blood pressure monitored, things like that.
Is it working? Is that working?
I'm not sure, but they've been doing it for a while. And people seem to like it. I haven't seen the data to say, is it actually keeping people healthier or lowering healthcare costs? But I think it's going in the right direction.
So let's extend that principle for a second, and then maybe at some point I could drag you into another show where we do something where you actually run your realage.com age and we cross compare each other's results, because I think you're one of the healthiest people out there, and you will make it to 110 because you understand all the principles. But imagine that the city of Palo Alto or the city of Menlo Park or the city of Sunnyvale decided as a city that we want to be a healthy city. So we will let you, as a citizen of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, whatever the city or town is. San Francisco, I think, would have a hard time even throwing this up as a trial balloon given the diverse culture. But let's take Palo Alto. Hey, we're going to give you some available credits at Stanford if you follow a health literacy agenda in your life as a citizen of Palo Alto, in combination with the Be Well program that you just described. That would be a really interesting experiment to see what the results would be in terms of overall healthcare costs in the city of Palo Alto if citizens really got on board for that. Because I think most citizens here in Palo Alto are very up on Stanford and are very positive about Stanford. So linking the two in some positive way would make a lot of sense to me. Yet those kinds of initiatives, they don't even get dreamt up. I just came up with that as we were talking. It doesn't seem to be on the agenda. It's more like, nah, you can't legislate health. Don't even imagine trying to legislate it, even with all sorts of inducements. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, well, it gets to, how is healthcare designed right now? What are the incentives for reimbursement? Really, the whole model needs to change, but that's a whole nother show, really.
So it's a whole nother show, and it really wraps into, if I could imagine the next president of the United States really coming up with a Make America Healthy Again. Remember that cap that I did and I gave it out to all the kids?
Right.
And people loved it. In fact, I've got one here somewhere. Someone may have taken it, but I've got one here. In fact, let me find it before we wrap up just so you can see it again. You can tell that this is a genuine, non-scripted show because I had to run out to get the cap. But you can see the Make America Healthy Again cap. I really do believe, and maybe it doesn't need to be red. Maybe it should be purple. Maybe it should be blue.
No, keep it red. I love the red. I love the red.
No, the red goes with the Cardinals. In fact, I showed this. I did training for federal mediators last week, and I wore this. And they said, "Why do you have red? Are you a Republican?" I said, "No, I did this because of Stanford. I gave these caps out at Stanford." You know, the back of this cap has a little statement, healthy100years.guru. That's a website that Wally and I are working on, because Healthy 100 Years is a nonprofit that we created with a view of trying to promote the ideas that you, he, and others at Stanford very much favor as part of the lifestyle medicine course that you put together for the medical students there, and which I'm a big promoter and supporter of, as you know.
Oh, we couldn't have
we need that additional support, right?
Oh, yeah. No, and I mean, I'd love to just thank you publicly for this, because we've been doing this now for over 10 years and really could not have done that course without your support. And it's branched out. It's not just med students, but we've got business students, engineering students, and undergraduates, and physical assistant students who want to take it. So the word's getting out.
And I think the students actually get more out of it in some ways than probably some of the other classes they take that are traditional medicine. You know, it's non-traditional medicine. It's almost medicine from a completely different perspective than the perspective that the U.S. system is based on, but that the U.S. system is breaking apart at the seams over, right?
Yeah, well, the system's designed to encourage, procedures and things that are going to bring in money to hospitals.
Right.
Not keeping people out of the hospitals. That's what, Wally talks about all the time.
And, my grandmother, we'll end on this point, my grandmother, who lived to 95, an Italian woman, came over at the age of 17, worked as a seamstress, and then eventually launched her own business, creating very expensive lace wedding dresses, handmade in New York to the stars. She probably could have been Vera Wang. Maybe she was in her day. And she said a good year is a year where there's no visit to no hospital. Of course, this is like better in Italian than it is in English. There's always a double negative. No visit to no hospital, no visit to no prison, and no visit to any place that brings you to any sort of depression, like any place that, like a visit would be to the home in the kitchen, not to some place that's going to bring you down, like, funerals, funeral homes, cemeteries, like, stay out of trouble medically, stay out of trouble legally, and just avoid places that bring you down. If you follow that path, you'll be on a good path. It's a good year, that sort of thing.
That's great advice. Right? We should all live like that.
We should all live like that. She lived to 95, and I think had she really taken care of her health, and she used to say she never took an aspirin, and you'll see on this Real Age thing, they ask you whether you've taken a low-dose aspirin, so they apparently think it's still a good idea. I think the literature is mixed on that, but we'll save that for another show. So I hope I can get you, Michael, to go to realage.com and run that, and we'll do another show to cross-compare our results each way. And then we'll talk a little bit further about the agenda that you see for the 2021 post-pandemic version of the Stanford group and institute that you're in real time creating at this point on longevity.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Count me in.
Okay, you take care. Thanks for spending part of your afternoon with me.
Thanks for the invitation. Really
You're welcome. It was fun. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.